Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Brian E. Roach.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Brian Roach, the host who doesn't like toast or the referees. And you know, everyone, the podcast, as always, is brought to you by our partners, one of whom is TSE and is going to have a nice big show with a lot of Steelers running backs coming up in early December. Franco Harris, Willie Parker, Barry Foster, Rocky Blyer, and Frenchie Fuqua will all be there. You can get pre-tickets for pre-sign-up tickets now on tseshop.com. And we have a new sponsor as well. For you Steelers fans out there, you can score photos of all the top plays and your favorite players by going to Steel City Underground /photos, which will give you a link to the Steelers' official online photo store, NFL Photos online. You're going to find the largest selection of premium quality photo canvas and metal prints, and those canvas things are really cool. The metal prints are also really cool. It's well worth looking out. New photos get added to this thing every week. And as always, when we have a new sponsor on, we've got some good stuff for you guys. If you go over there, use the code SteelCity at checkout on your first order, you're going to get 25% off. So jump on over to steelcityunderground.com /photos, click on the link there, go to the NFL photo store, and save some money. Hey, it's Christmas time. Steelers photos are always a great Christmas present. All right, let's get this show on the road, folks. It is a new week. The Steelers are 8-2, heading into their next game against the Green Bay Packers. And in order to help us look at that game, we've got a guest on the show today, Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers podcast. Peter, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get running on this, just tell everybody how they can find you, what you're doing, who you are, what they can do to follow you out there in the Twitterverse and all the interwebs.
Ooh, the shameless plug right off the top. I like it. All right, I am on Twitter at Peter_Bukowski. You can follow my work on the Packers at SB Nation at acmepackingcompany.com. You can find my work on the NFL as a whole at fanragsports.com. You can find other workings of mine at Dime and Uprock Sports. LockedOnPackers.com is where the podcast is. At Locked On Packers on Twitter. What did I miss? LinkedIn, Peter Bukowski, I guess, if you want to do that.
Sure.
Instagram, Peter_Bukowski. Come on. It's all there.
Everything.
Google me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it hasn't been a great year for the Packers so far. It's been a little bit of a tough one, to say the least. The injury bugs. I got a good friend of mine at work. His name is Joff. I call him Joff because he spells it with a G, but it's Jeff.
Yeah, that's not the correct spelling of Jeff.
Yeah, I agree. It's not. But he thinks it is. But that's okay. He's from Oregon.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And he's been very frustrated. We were actually going to drive out to Pittsburgh, he and his wife, and my wife, and we were going to go to the game. But after, I guess, last week and watching the Ravens and the Packers, he decided he wasn't going to go. And I can't really blame him. I mean, you know, it's tough when Aaron Rodgers goes down and you have to bring in Brett Hundley and try and have it carry over. Is this, does it feel like the Packers are a little snake bit with injuries?
I don't know if snake bit is the right word, but we are to the point now where there's a running joke on Packers Twitter that they are the Pack IRs. And it does seem like, this was... Look, I try and not to engage in this kind of thinking, but it's hard. The Packers were 4-1 when Rodgers goes down, and they would probably be 9-1 or at worst 8-2 or 7-3 with him right now. So there's all of these issues that Packers Twitter is mushroom clouding over that would just not exist if Aaron Rodgers were on the field. And they would still, even with the New Orleans Saints looking like they look and the Eagles looking like they look, and the Rams and the Vikings and whoever else, that is all irrelevant if Aaron Rodgers is healthy. It's the one injury the team could not afford. That's just the way that they're built. It's the way that they're set up. And it is actually Ted Thompson, this is the crazy thing, because he doesn't get credit for Aaron Rodgers. He just gets credit for the failings since Aaron Rodgers. Like, he doesn't get credit for drafting Rodgers when Brett Favre was still on the team, like, right, if we really want to go back. But Thompson is the perfect GM for an Aaron Rodgers team, specifically because he loves young talent. And you can live with mistakes from young talent because eventually they become not young talent. And you have a quarterback who can erase those mistakes. And when you lose that eraser, you have got a picture that looked like a 2-year-old colored it.
Yeah.
It is not the same picture as with Aaron Rodgers. And so suddenly you look and the holes on the passing defense look worse than they may have otherwise looked. The offensive line looks worse than it may have otherwise looked. Suddenly the receivers look slow, even though the reality is the receivers are open all game. Brett Hundley just can't get them the ball. And so it's frustrating if you're a Packers fan, because in a season where the league sucks, right? Yeah. Most of the league is terrible. The AFC is complete garbage. And as you well know, and the NFC is like, okay, but compared to the AFC, it's really good. But even so, it's not great. This is a game where the Packers could have sleptwalked at least the divisional round in the NFC. And that's with Aaron Rodgers. And so they had the one injury that they couldn't afford at a time where they most couldn't afford it.
Yeah. I mean, anybody losing their franchise quarterback, and we've talked about this ad nauseum on Steel City Underground. There really are legitimately very few franchise quarterbacks in the league, and a team that has one and can depend on one, when you lose that guy, it's a gaping hole. But I mean, he's not the only one that's been hurt either. I mean, I was trying to go through the injury report from last week and kind of look at who they have on IR. And as you said, they're the Pack IRs. But I mean, is it really to the point where it's easier to ask who's healthy as opposed to who's hurt?
You know, the great irony of all of this was the week after the bye against the Lions, they had almost their whole team healthy except Aaron Rodgers.
Wow.
And it still didn't matter because Morgan Burnett got hurt again, and Brian Bulaga got hurt again. He tears his ACL and he's out for the year now. And Ty Montgomery re-injures the ribs. And so it is, maybe I wouldn't have used the word snake bitten, but like, I'm sure Packers fans feel like, here we go again. But the year that they went to the Super Bowl and won in 2010, that team was beat up, and they just kept finding ways to win because they had field tilters on both sides of the ball.
We don't talk about that.
They had Clay Matthews. They had Clay Matthews in his prime. They had Charles Woodson in his prime. And a lot of people not in Wisconsin will forget that Nick Collins was a multiple-time Pro Bowler, and he hurt his neck the year after they won the Super Bowl, the year they won 15 games. They didn't have their Pro Bowl free safety, who was basically their defensive magic eraser in the back end.
We don't talk about the 2010 Super Bowl.
I figured that I would roll past that as quickly as possible so as to engender as much sympathy with your fans as I possibly could. But they don't have that anymore. They don't have that balance. And Ted Thompson, I just extolled his virtues, but much like Pittsburgh has been unable to find for the last few years, as Polamalu has aged out of the game, as Ike Taylor has aged out of the game, as James Harrison, he's not quite aged out of the game, but he's aged out of high impact situations. They've been unable to replace those guys with even 80-85% of what they were. And so as a result, the margin of error is smaller. And that's what you're seeing with Green Bay right now. Brett Hundley against the Bears made 2 or 3 plays to win the game. And against the Ravens, he made 2 or 3 plays to lose it. Packer fans are just used to, and the same with Steelers fans, they're used to their quarterbacks making those 3 or 4 plays a game that you have to make to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking of Hundley, right? So he's played, 5 games since Rodgers got hurt?
Not.
Yeah, or maybe not. And, it's...
Yeah, 5 games, 4 starts.
For the most part, it hasn't been overwhelming. 39.6 passer rating against the Vikings, 39.9 against the Saints, halfway decent 86 against the Lions, 110.8 against the Bears, and then 43.6 against the Ravens. But, 2 touchdown passes versus 7 interceptions. And I almost feel like I can't be reading this right. He's been sacked 17 times in those 5 games.
Yeah, not a misprint.
I mean, it helps getting 6 by the Ravens in one game. That bumps that number way up. Are those sacks because he's holding the ball, or is it just because the offensive line has become a little porous? Is it a combination of all those things?
It's a combination. And I guess I'll also point this out. In his 4 starts, but if you look at their 5 games total, by DVOA, which is a Football Outsiders defense adjusted value over average. Not sure how familiar your audience is with that, but it's a great statistic. And if you want to figure out why I like it, you can Google it. But
yep.
Minnesota, 8th best defense by DVOA, 12th against the pass. New Orleans, 3rd best defense, 4th against the pass. Detroit, 13th best defense, 10th against the pass. Chicago, 10th best defense, 11th against the pass. And they all have at least one elite edge rusher.
Gotcha.
And really, they all have at least one really good outside corner. In the case of Minnesota, they have multiple. New Orleans, that one's a rookie, but Marshawn Lattimore is playing as well as any defensive back, really any defensive player in the league. So I think there's a confluence of factors here. The offensive line has been inconsistent even in games when they've been totally healthy. Brett Hundley has been slow and indecisive when it comes to his decision-making, especially on throws to the middle of the field. And the play calling has just not been where it needs to be. Mike McCarthy is trying to get Brett Hundley to play a game that he's not comfortable playing, and that is winning from the pocket consistently, being Aaron Rodgers. I think Mike McCarthy genuinely, in his heart of hearts, thought Brett Hundley could come in and be 75% of Aaron Rodgers and run this offense. And he must do it in practice. Mike McCarthy in his press conference on Monday sort of intimated, he said, it doesn't matter what you look like in practice. At a certain point, you are what you put on film, which I read as Brett Hundley does what we ask him to do in practice. But when he comes on the field with live bullets, it's a little overwhelming for him. Yeah. Which, listen, this is 4 NFL starts in. This should not be surprising. I think we vastly overrate this idea of he's been in the league 3 years and he's been in the system 3 years, because unless you're on the field and you have defenses scheming to stop you and you have to game plan every week, that's just a unique thing to do every week. And the CBA does not allow you to get your backups the kind of reps that your starters get. It's hard to develop 2 positions right now because of the CBA, quarterback and offensive line. And Green Bay, frankly, has struggled to develop both in the last few years.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said about the difference between even going up against your own guys versus, a scout team that's trying to mimic the team you're about to play. Because, you can look really good against a scout team because that scout team doesn't have Terrell Suggs on it, and it doesn't have Cameron Hayward on it, or any of these other guys that are, essentially, top level, if not all the way at the top, upper echelon kind of players within the league. And it makes it hard to really evaluate sometimes practice versus play. But, you're right. Eventually, what you put, there's no doubt about it. What you put on the field is who you are. And so far, as we said, Hundley has been less than overwhelmingly on the upside of things. But, all those sacks, and I'm thinking about it, and I don't know what the DVA for the Steelers is because I haven't looked. I've looked at that stat before, but I don't know it off the top of my head. But I do know they're number 2 in the league in sacks. So what I'm wondering is, with the amount of sacks they've been giving up, how are they going to keep Hundley upright against the Steelers?
I wish I had an answer for you. I don't have one. The Steelers are 3rd in adjusted sack rate, by the way, to answer your question. Okay. So adjusted sack rate essentially accounts for how often teams are throwing, because it's fine if you have a bunch of sacks, but if teams are throwing 50 times a game against you, those sack numbers are not quite as impressive, but that's not the case for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is 4th overall in DVOA defensively. So they've been really good. And that's not a surprise. I think if there's one way that Green Bay can mitigate the pass rush, it's to run the ball effectively. And if you look at, say, the Bears game, the Bears, rushed for over 200 yards in that game. I think they completed 1 pass to a receiver and won the game.
Right. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
And so, like, I think that has to be the model if you're the Packers, is you have to run to make sure that the Steelers can't pin their ear back. So, so Bud Dupree and those guys can't just and TJ Watt can't just tee off on Justin McCray, who's the Packers backup right tackle, who I had been, we'll say affectionately calling Google McCray because I couldn't remember his first name for the first month of the season. I mean, this is the level of player that they're having to go to. I mean, he is the backup to the backup to the backup to the backup at this point. And so that's just suboptimal when you have rushers as capable as Pittsburgh has. And the other thing I wrote about this week for SB Nation, and that is I think Green Bay needs to run with Brett Hundley more often. He is not going to win from the pocket. His best attribute is his legs. He's one of the top athletes to come out of college at the position in recent memory, really in the last 10 or 15 years. His first play of college, just for those who don't follow UCLA football a lot, and why would you lately? Jim Mora just got fired for a reason.
Yeah.
His first play of college, he takes a zone read 70-plus yards to the house. I mean, this is the kind of athlete and runner that he is. He can make plays with his legs. And why Green Bay doesn't run zone read with him 10 times a game, he doesn't have to keep it 10 times. Just run the play with him 10 times. And I don't understand why they don't do that more, why they haven't coached him to take off more. One of his major issues is he will bail in the pocket to try and keep plays alive rather than step up in the pocket, which I have armchair psychology diagnosed him as a lot of these running quarterbacks. And this is actually something that happens with Josh Dobbs as well, who is Steelers draft pick at Tennessee.
Yeah.
Running quarterbacks often get coached early in their career. If it's not there, take off. If you don't have option number one, run it. And that is true of a lot of college quarterbacks and even as they get into the NFL. But guys who have pedigree and come into college and who want to play in the NFL, they say, okay, I want to be a passer and I want to win from the pocket, because they know what the stigma is on these, if it's not their takeoff quarterbacks. I think Brett Hundley has had people drill into his mind for the last 2+ years in college and then 3 years in Green Bay, keep the play alive to throw, that he is afraid to step up in the pocket because that's his way of admitting, okay, now I'm a runner.
Yeah, it's a good
point.
point.
It's hard to undo that many years of coaching in his mind, because it should just be his instinct. If it's not there, I'm going to take off and create something with my legs because that's his best attribute.
Yeah, and I read that article that you're talking about, and it made a lot of good points. And I wonder, because where the Steelers have had strength in their running defense has been when teams try to run up the middle, staying inside the tackles. Where they've been weak and what killed them against the Bears was outside runs, outside zone runs,
yep.
All those kind of schemes. They have had problems. Now they've cleaned some of that up and they've gotten better. But even going back to the Ravens game in Baltimore that they won, the Ravens had tremendous success running the ball outside, like 54+ yards in the first quarter. And then they just stopped doing it. And they decided, no, this is the AFC North. We're going to go in between the tackles. It's going to be smash mouth. We're running up the middle. And they couldn't do a thing the rest of the game. And I haven't watched enough Packers games to know what style of running attack they tend to favor. Is it an interior run game? Is it an exterior run game? What are we looking at? And I think even now, another injury is there because Ty Montgomery's out as well, right?
Well, we don't know if Ty Montgomery is going to play yet. He re-aggravated the rib injury against the Ravens against the Bears late about halfway through that game, in fact, because he was really playing well early. But the Packers' run game, I hate to tell you, is a zone scheme, and they do run a fair amount of outside zone. In fact, they're one of the only teams in the league who runs less than half of their runs in the middle of the field. 42% of their runs are either over the guard and center on either side. And the only team, I guess there's two teams that run less. Well, okay, 3 teams run less: Detroit, Chicago, and Atlanta. Those are the only 3 teams that run less often straight up the middle power football. Green Bay does not do that often. They're actually one of the most balanced running teams in the league. About 18% of their plays on the left side on the tackle, 9% on the right on the right side, and then 15% right tackle, 16% left tackle, and just 42% in the middle of the field. Most teams are heavy majority of their runs in the middle of the field. And so that is good for Green Bay in that, as you said, one of the ways that Pittsburgh can be vulnerable is their linebackers will over pursue. They'll get out of position, and suddenly a run that should be 2 yards is 6, 8, and 10 yards. And so just for comparison's sake, Pittsburgh runs 64% of their runs in between the tackles. So basically from guard to guard.
Yep.
So that's a pretty big difference. And just flipping it around, Green Bay's best attribute is up the middle defense. They're a top 10 defense against the run. Losing Kenny Clark this week is a big deal. It's a high ankle sprain for him, but Mike Daniels is still a monster. They still have Quentin Dial, who's a solid rotation player, defensive lineman. And Blake Martinez, their main middle linebacker, who gets the most snaps anyway, is playing at a Pro Bowl level. So Pittsburgh ability to run in between the tackles, I don't know that Pittsburgh should expect to have a lot of success in that way. If they're going to use Le'Veon Bell in any way in particular, it should be in the passing game. Green Bay is one of the worst teams in the league defending running backs in the passing game. Drew Brees absolutely killed them with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram out of the backfield.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Le'Veon. You know, it always feels like it's a toy that they play with when they feel like. He had a tremendous game against the Bengals. It was the Le'Veon Bell show. Everybody was talking about, okay, he's back. All the rust is worn off from what they termed, and I'm using air quotes, the holdout. Since I don't really call it a holdout, I don't think it was. It was just I'm not going to waste my time coming to practice. But then we have the last couple games where they barely gave him the ball at all, and he has been in a lot of games this year, other than that Bengals game, fairly ineffectual even in the passing game, where Ben's been dumping the ball off to him, but he hasn't been able to make the first guy miss, and it's been resulted in short passes. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. That doesn't bode well. I don't like hearing about that outside run zone. But that. Hopefully the Steelers have gotten the discipline back to what they need. Shazier's either going to over-pursue or he's going to make a great play. It's going to be one or the other. And Vince Williams has started to play a little better as well. It'll be interesting. That's basically all I can say. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, clearly I think the Steelers are going to be favored in this game, but what do the Packers really need to do to come out of Pittsburgh with the upset victory?
Invent time travel.
Go back and get get Aaron Rodgers unhurt.
Well, if they're going to get Brett, they might as well get Favre from '96 or something. That could work. No, I do think there is a path to victory, and it is not that I think that that's likely to happen. I mean, the Steelers are a 2-touchdown favorite for a reason, but to me, the path is Green Bay runs the ball effectively, and they limit the number of possessions in this game. They create 2 or 3 big plays down the field. They've been setting up to take some shots, and basically every other game they've hit their shot. And even against the Ravens, they hit a shot early to Devontae Adams that if it's a little bit a better throw, it's probably a touchdown. Mm-hmm. And then 2 plays later, Hundley throws an interception in the red zone. So they have to limit the turnovers. They cannot give Pittsburgh extra possessions, or this game is going to get out of hand. But then defensively, if they can get after Roethlisberger a little bit, and with Marcus Gilbert ailing, Nick Perry is playing really well. They got Vince Beagle off PUP. He's a rookie with some pass rush juice. If they get Clay Matthews back, he's been playing really well, even though the sack numbers don't show it. He's been outstanding as a run defender and a disruptor for this defense. If they can create some pressure on Roethlisberger and create a turnover or 2, and they in turn don't turn it over, I think that's the key for them to keep it at least close. And if they can hit those shot plays, then I think they have a chance to win one of those really ugly, like 20-14, 20-17 type games. I don't think Pittsburgh, even with the extra time off, I mean, the reason they won that game 40-10 or whatever that score was against Tennessee was because Marcus Mariota threw the ball to Pittsburgh too many times.
Oh, yeah.
They were not on their way to blowing out Tennessee in that game, short of all of those horrible mistakes. And the way that their offense looks in fits and starts and the way that their defense looks doesn't create a ton of turnovers. I don't see some sort of like similar 30-point outcome. I think we're going to see a 24-13 kind of game, 21-10, something like that, where the Steelers win. The game is never really in doubt, but the score sort of indicates that it might be. And then at the end, either Pittsburgh gets a touchdown or a field goal or something to sort of say, okay, the aesthetics of this are nice and we won. And thank God we didn't lose to Brett Hundley.
Right.
That seems like the most likely scenario to me. Unfortunately, it's not going to be, what was the game in 2009, 37-36, something like that.
The last second pass to Mike Wallace.
That incredible, one of the best regular season Packer games I've ever watched.
Oh, it was an awesome game. No doubt about that.
Probably the best regular season game I've ever watched in which the Packers lost.
Yeah. That was one of those games, could have gone either way. And I kept saying it early on in the game, whoever has the ball last is going to win this game.
Yeah, that was the birth of the belt as a nationwide phenomenon. I don't know if you knew that.
No.
Rodgers was sort of doing it, but people mostly didn't notice. And then in that game, he ran a touchdown in and did the belt, and it became a huge thing because I think that was the late afternoon game, and so that was a national game. And it must have been because I was living on the West Coast and watched it. And it was one of those things that like it still wasn't quite the discount double check, but it was like, oh, this is a fun thing that Rodgers does. And of course there was the Skip Bayless, he hasn't earned this take and nonsense like that. But no, I think that was the game. That's the earliest game I can remember it in a high leverage, big spot that he broke that out.
Wow, I did not know that either. I hadn't noticed. And I'm old, so sometimes I forget stuff. But yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon. A lot of things came out of that game. It was just the fourth quarter comebacks. It's just a great game. I can't disagree with you on that at all. One other question I got for you before we wrap this thing up. Obviously Steelers fans are not going to be as familiar with the Packers as they are with AFC North teams or AFC teams in general. Is there somebody on the Packers that has the potential to be kind of a surprise impact player that the Steelers fans should be looking out for?
I would have said Kenny Clark before his injury because I think he has been and become one of the best interior defenders in the league, and because he doesn't get sexy sack totals, he's not on a lot of fans' radars. I think he could have blown up a lot of those inside runs that Le'Veon waits, and then suddenly there's a crack and he goes. And Kenny Clark is just too athletic to try and do that against, and Green Bay's interior is well suited to handle that. I would say probably the answer is Blake Martinez. He has been playing at a Pro Bowl level this year, and he can get sideline to sideline. I think you're going to see him on Le'Veon Bell if they send Le'Veon Bell across the middle. Although the other name that I'll add is Josh Jones, who's a rookie out of North Carolina State.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. I liked him a lot in college.
He's really, really talented. He's an incredible athlete, a 4'4" guy, 40+ inch vertical, and doesn't just look great at the combine. He's one of those guys that you put him in man coverage against a running back or a tight end, and they're not going to be open. He's too athletic. He can run with anyone, and I think you will see him too against Le'Veon Bell. To me, that's the matchup, because Antonio Brown is going to get his every week. Le'Veon Bell, they have a chance to win. And so they're going to do a lot of different kinds of things. They're going to throw a lot of bodies at him. It's a week that you'd love to have Morgan Burnett, who doesn't seem to be healthy. But Josh Jones this game is why they drafted Josh Jones. You have that guy. There's a local radio guy in Milwaukee, calls it the cat defense. You've got that cat. You've got that cat. You've got that cat. Le'Veon Bell is the big cat, right? You've got that guy. Do not let him get anywhere that he wants to get to. And that's the thing is, this is why you draft athletes. Le'Veon Bell is not a great athlete. He's just really crafty. He's really smart. He has the best vision of any running back playing in the game right now. And that's where his value is. But like from an athletic standpoint, he's not going to out-athlete anyone. And this is what Green Bay has done to remake their defense, much like the Steelers have, sort of in the similar image of, let's just stack as many athletes as we can here and figure it out. And the Steelers have figured it out faster than Green Bay has, in part because they made the change away from Dick LeBeau, and Green Bay with Dom Capers did not with the Dick LeBeau disciple. And I just, I think that's really the difference in the development of these two defenses at this point.
Yeah, it was interesting. We were doing draft work last year, and we really wanted the Steelers to pick Josh Jones. We had him mocked to us in several cases, but we kept saying the same things over and over again. Whoever we want, the Packers are picking right in front of us,
right?
And they have the exact same needs, and
and run a similar defense. And,
yeah, it's like, if we want that guy, so do they. It was very frustrating.
Let me tell you, it was frustrating for Packers fans who traded out of the first round with TJ Watt still on the board, and then not only did the Packers trade out, then the Steelers take the guy that so many Packers and Badgers fans wanted them to take at a position of need.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you got the other guy, right? Beagle, right?
Yeah, Vince Beagle, who is just coming off of PUP. He did some really nice things against Baltimore. He's got some juice in the pass rush game. I expect to see him a lot this week. The Wisconsin linebackers, if you don't watch Big Ten football, Jack Cichy is really good. Unfortunately, he got hurt this year, but the Badgers, they've put out some really good defensive players over the last few years, and Beagle and Watt are two of them. Both, I think, are going to be very good players in the league for a long time.
Yeah, I'm a big Buckeye fan, so I'm looking ahead to that Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin.
Can I tell you a brief interlude story? I hope we're not running up against the clock.
Absolutely.
But my very first date with my current wife, who I married in September, was at Wisconsin-Ohio State in 2010.
Wow.
At Camp Randall, and her father is a proud Buckeye. He had 2 tickets to the game, and my wife's brother cheers for the Buckeyes, and so he said, her dad said, "I'm taking your brother. You'll have to figure out how to get to the game on your own." And how does she find a way to get to the game? But me, and it was our first date, and we've been together for 7 years.
Awesome. That's an awesome story. Yeah. Your father-in-law sounds like my grandfather.
Yeah,
same kind of story.
He told the story at the wedding, and it is a great story. So
at my brother's wedding, my youngest brother foolishly scheduled his wedding in late November on a Saturday, and of course that was the Michigan game.
Yeah, what are you doing, guy?
I know, it was crazy. So my grandfather has a radio in his pocket sitting in the stands, and all of us are crowded around him. And in the middle of the game, the Buckeyes are winning, and they score a touchdown, and the vows are being recited up above, and you hear people going, "Yes, go Bucks!" my sister-in-law, I don't think, has ever forgiven that situation, but it's.
Oh, I bet.
College football, man.
Yeah, I know.
All right, Peter, I want to thank you again for joining us. I think it was a lot of good information for Steelers fans to try and absorb. One more time, let everybody know how they can find you, follow you, and whatnot.
So you can follow me on Twitter at Peter_Bukowski, BUKOWSKI. I do cover the Packers for SB Nation, but I cover more than that. So you don't have to worry about only getting Packers stuff from me. From FanRag Sports, I write about the NFL. I've even written about the Steelers from time to time. So Juju Smith-Schuster was one of my favorite players coming out of the draft. There are probably few people on draft Twitter who were higher on Juju than I was. So awesome. I actually desperately wanted Green Bay to draft him, but knew that he would go higher than they would probably be willing to take him. So, and then Locked On Packers is the podcast, LockedOnPackers.com. if you wanna listen in, that would be great. We would love to have you.
All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. As always, it's chaos out there. Be kind, and we will talk to you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.